What's up, everybody? Welcome to PAX Online. We are going over our panel, which is called Not Your Therapist. And we are going to be talking about managing mental health in streaming. So I want to, first and foremost, introduce our panelists, go over a little bit of background of what this panel is going to consist of. And then we have got some questions for everybody that will maybe help about understanding mental health in streaming, as well as community management. So I would love for our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your stream and what you do.
I'll start us off. Hi, everyone. It's Anxiety. I'm a mental health talk show host on Twitch. I'm also an author. I talk to professionals and people living with mental health conditions alike. And I have a wonderful, wonderful, warm community as well. Celeste?
Hi, I'm Celis. I am a mental health streamer. I also stream games. In real life, I am a scientist. And that plays into my whole community. That's it, actually.
Okay, I'm Dr. M, also known as Gamer Doc. I'm a medical doctor who treats gamers, and I run a stream on Wednesday nights where we talk about health and wellness as related to video gaming, and obviously mental health is a big part of that. So, looking forward to having this conversation with all these bright minds.
Kilmer?
I can go next. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kilmer. I'm a clinical psychologist and the director of education and training at Game to Grow. I don't stream, but I am here to help answer some of the mental health and boundary related questions.
And my name is Shauna Spain. My handle is Like Seven Spoon. I run a community where we play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. We do it politely and safely. I talk a lot about that. I'm an accessibility streamer, so I'm both autistic and I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, so I talk a lot about that. I'm a big advocate for that community. And I have opinions, so that's probably why I'm here.
And that's what we need is opinions. I'm Dr. Emery Daniel. I'm an assistant professor at Appalachian State University. I'm also the marketing director at Geeks Like Us. My handle is at FusroDoc. So please come visit me. The reason that this panel was assembled with just so many amazing, talented people here is this actually stemmed from a study that myself and two colleagues, Dr. Ariane Fauché and Dr. Steph Orm, started to work on about understanding toxicity and privacy issues when it comes to streaming. And we really we found some kind of anecdotal evidence when we were talking to streamers about what are their experiences and a little bit about those issues of, again, toxicity, as well as what do they keep close to their person, how they feel like they keep their privacy and so forth. And so while those things were somewhat apparent, and they very much were, there were also seemed to be a lot of communication while we were going through it about this whole notion of, quote, I'm not your therapist. This came up quite a bit. And so I tried to reach out to everybody in this group, and with overwhelming enthusiasm, which I was thrilled to see so many people that were enthusiastic about this topic, I wanted to ask some questions about not only the idea of what this is about, but also what are some things that we can learn from it? What are some things that we can take away and use in applicable streaming contexts? So for those who are just starting streaming, that's kind of a thing that I'd really like to focus on by asking these amazing people here. So the exact line of "I'm not your therapist" came up many times within the interviews with strong agreement. So my question is for y'all, what are some experiences that you've had with this issue, as it's been kind of consistent rhetoric, and why do you think this is so common and an important thing to talk about?
I mean, I could start if you'd like. So because specifically my streams are about mental health on Saturdays, I have a show called Self-Care Saturdays, where we pick a mental health topic and we break it down from a peer-reviewed scientific perspective and then see what we can take from that and apply it to our everyday lives, right? And because of that, I get a lot of people who are struggling with mental health, and when they see me talking about these topics, they feel it's one of those relationships where I'm talking to all of the chat, but everyone in the chat is talking directly to me, right? So what ends up happening is that sometimes they feel like I'm the one who can help them with their specific issue. But one of the things that I've had to learn over the years is that that's not my job. I'm an advocate, and I can take you to resources that can help you, but at the end of the day, like, I can't be the one to give you specific advice about your specific situation. I can tell you what I've done when I've been in similar situations. I can try and direct you towards like help, but that can also be really difficult for some people because they see like the streamer as a person who's giving them this helpful information, and they kind of build this relationship, and they assume that that relationship goes both ways. And one of the more difficult aspects is having to specifically set that boundary, and at times have to say, no, I can't help you with this. I can send you to this, this, and this, but specifically telling them like, no, and that's hard.
I've had a similar experience, and I'm very vocal about being autistic, and I talk a lot about it. And so I'll have people approach me and say, hey, so you're autistic, can you tell me if I'm autistic? And the first thing that I tell them, the first thing that I tell them is that I want to talk to them and I want to share my experience with them, but if they would like a diagnosis, they need to go talk to a doctor. And that I'm happy to talk to you about what getting a diagnosis might mean for you. And so I have a lot of conversations with people where I have to very gently remind them that this is my experience, this is what I've gone through, these are some resources you can look into. This is what the world looks like with a piece of paper and without one, for me. And mostly what it ends up being is a lot of listening and a lot of gentle deflection to, I can't tell you if you're autistic. I can't tell you if you need to use a wheelchair. I can encourage you if that's something you want to pursue, and I can be there for you and support you, but I don't have that knowledge. And I think that's okay. I think that's good to have people like me out in the world that can't do autistic diagnosis, but can have that conversation with somebody from that level, and it took me a really long time to get there. A lot of my friends are doctors, and it's horribly intimidating. I have a very nice bachelor's degree, and it's not in anything related to this stuff. So I eventually got to a place where I was like, no, this is good. Then I started running a game, and a character was like, I would like to play somebody with a disability just to see what it's like. And I was like, no. Because I'm not your therapist. I don't want to, they were like, I want to see if I have this, and so I want to play through it. And I know GMs that will do that, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not comfortable doing that as a GM because I don't have that skill set. I don't have a skill set where I can run a group where I can help you through a mental health issue. I just don't. My groups are not for that. And so that's a good place to have as well, I think.
I think I'm going to add to that since we're on the advocacy portion of this. I also experienced something similar to what Celeste is describing, where people will come in and they'll be like, okay, but give me advice. And especially this is hard because in the beginning of every stream, one of the things I ask is, if there's something that you feel like you can't tell people because you know they would be bummed out, this is a great place if you want to vent about it. And I make that, and setting that specific boundary that you're just venting. This is not going to be where people are going to give you advice. This is just your place to say, I'm really freaking sad, and nobody accepts that as an acceptable, like that is not an okay thing for me to normally to talk about, and I just want to say that I'm sad here. I've also set up in our Discord, we have 2 separate rooms. One is called Just Venting and one is Support, and the support will reply. And the Just Venting room is specifically for anybody to just like write out here's what I just need to get out into the world. And the support room is where things get tricky. You know, we have all the disclaimers that nobody's here as a doctor. And, you know, you'll see things that people expect you to reply to that unfortunately, like, I have to step in, or one of my moderators steps in and says, like, we cannot help you with that specifically, but like that situation sucks. And just ensuring that you validate while continuously reinforcing those boundaries. And that can be definitely exhausting.
Yeah, validation is important, and those boundaries are so important.
Yeah, I think the advocacy and the validation is so important, right? And speaking as a mental health professional, there are a lot of things that I can do. I can diagnose people. I can offer therapy. I run therapeutic tabletop role-playing games, so I can do those things. But that's a very different kind of relationship than sitting with someone and saying, man, I've been there too, and I understand. And it's a different kind of relationship on purpose, right? They're both really, really valuable. And they're both really valuable. And in, you know, all of my millions of years of graduate school, we talk a lot about boundaries, right? We talk a lot about how do you set boundaries with your clients? How do you set boundaries around work? How do you set boundaries? And we don't talk about that just in everyday life, which is ridiculous because I feel like I spend most of my time with my clients talking about how to set healthy boundaries, because it is so important. And setting healthy boundaries and setting healthy expectations is what allows us to feel safe and allows us to get really deep and allows us to get really genuine in relationships. But if I don't know when someone's going to stop pushing, or I don't feel comfortable saying, like, please stop, then neither of us is really going to be able to be genuine. Neither of us is going to get what we're looking for out of that relationship. And I have been in Discord servers before where, like, the support channel was there, but without all of those boundaries. And that can be a really scary place for anybody to be. Because if you happen to be in that server and someone comes in crisis, it suddenly feels like it is totally your responsibility to save that person's life.
Right.
Yeah.
And you may not have the training or the skills or the spoons to deal with it in that moment. And that's why your Discord server should never be a crisis line. But if those boundaries and those guidelines aren't set up, you can feel really, really stuck, because now this is a person in this server needing this help.
Yeah,
and you feel
it's
like
so hard.
You don't know what to do.
And people sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that in our Discord, we have a very specific protocol for what to do with people who are in crisis. And it maybe doesn't sound like the nicest thing, right? But actually what my moderators and I do is that if someone comes in and they're talking about topics that are like, you know, stuff like suicide that can be like, or self-harm that can be very triggering to others, and they're talking about it in a way that makes us like worried for them, the first thing that we'll actually do is, this sounds weird, we're going to quarantine them. So we actually take that user out from like the general chats, and we have a specific chat where like the moderators and myself will like reach out to them and be like, hey, I understand that you're in a crisis. Can we help you by directing you to these specific resources? And like, it sounds a little bit
It's a good idea.
rough to like remove them from the community, like at that moment. But
you have to protect your community and that person at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I don't necessarily want to risk someone giving advice to that person that ends up being harmful, and I don't want to risk their situation triggering others.
Right.
So we'll kind of like reach out to them, try to get them connected with as many resources as we can, and once they kind of come back and are in a more stable place, then they're like essentially reintroduced to the community.
Absolutely. And think about this, if Discord was in person, right? If we're in like a crowded restaurant and someone is in crisis, do you just keep them in the middle of that crowded restaurant?
Oh,
Right.
No, you don't. That's not helpful for anyone in the restaurant. It's not helpful for that person. It's going to become really overwhelming, right? You work really hard to give that person some privacy, get them to the resources that can help them, right? You're going to call 911. You're going to ask if there's a doctor around, but you're not going to be like, cool, there's a person collapsed in the middle of the floor.
Right.
Everybody just watch.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
That's fair.
And especially when we kind of remove that, right? And you are behind a keyboard and you're not seeing anyone and you're not talking to anyone and you have no idea what's going on in someone's life. having if you are in a Discord and you think this Discord is a safe space where no one is going to come in crisis, and all of a sudden someone now comes in crisis, that can trigger other people to feel really, really uncomfortable. They might feel really, really distressed. And this may be the place where they had come to kind of calm themselves down a little bit. But now if there's someone in crisis, it doesn't do that. The other thing is, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
The other thing is there are some really good crisis lines out there. And now I'm not saying if you've called a crisis line and you've had a bad experience and that's on you, because I'm not saying that everyone who works at a crisis line is amazing. I wish that they were. But crisis lines exist for a reason. Most of them are run really, really well. And when you call a crisis line, you're talking to someone who's trained to deal with someone in crisis, to talk to someone, to be there with you in crisis, and someone who's consented to that, who says, I got on, this is my shift, I'm ready to do this, right? I think sometimes when you pop in a Discord server, you might be popping on as a mod is like about to go to bed. And they don't have they might really, really, really want to help you, but they might not have the training and they might not have the energy to do that right now. And that is okay because they are people too.
The thing that I've heard a lot that I think is scariest to me is that people have talked to me and been like, well, how could you have turned this person away, right? Like Celeste was saying, isolating them, or me, somebody comes into my stream and they say I'm suicidal, and I go, okay, here's the resources. Like we kind of do what you do in your Discord, but we do that on stream. We kind of put them aside, we time them out, and then moderators talk to them and send them resources and everything. And people have asked me, they're like, well, why can't you help? And they've said things like, well, I will try to help, until my dying breath. Well, somebody actually said that to me. They're like, because it's so important and I don't want people to feel alone. And I just always reinforce, like, that's fantastic if you have the full bandwidth and you are prepared and you have the background to be able to do that. Otherwise, you could potentially hurt someone more by playing a therapist than by sending them to the resources they're supposed to go to. So it's not that you're rejecting that person, it's that you are bringing them closer to the correct destination than attempting to pretend to be one yourself.
That's exactly why I don't do it in my server. I don't have that many mods. I have mods that babysit me, not the community. Your communities sound amazing, and I love what you've set up, but I don't have the resources to do that. So my best bet is to not do that. That's what I know. We've been talking a lot about Discord, but I do this same thing in my D&D games. Is if somebody's having a crisis, we don't play, or they don't play. It's not because I'm being mean. It's because they're not bringing their self to the table, they're bringing their crisis to the table, and I want them to take the space to take care of themselves. I do everything I can for them as a friend, but that doesn't include me being like, all right, let's get to the bottom of, and being their therapist. I'm not equipped to do that. It'll set me off. There's a reason I didn't go to school for this. And maybe someday I'll grow a community like these lovely ladies or humans here, and maybe I won't. Maybe I'll lurk in each of your communities and watch how cool you are.
That's fine too.
Yeah.
Gamer Doc, you've been awfully quiet. Do you have any thoughts?
I mean, you guys have all said some pretty awesome things. I think it's really interesting because as a medical doctor, right? Like you guys are all saying, I'm not a therapist and I'm also not your therapist. It's like, yeah, we are equipped to handle these things, but it's not the time or the place sometimes, right? Like in order for me to be an efficient doctor, like I would be a terrible doctor for all of you because we don't have that type of boundaries. When I'm at work, one of my roommates used to work with me, and when I'm at work, I'm a very different person, right? I have to, as a younger looking, woman, I have to do a lot of things to demand respect, and one of them is setting up really strict boundaries with my patients, like we were talking about earlier. So even if you were a medical provider and even if you wanted to be the person's therapist who was coming to you in crisis, you probably don't have the correct boundaries set up to be an effective, care provider.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I was in a Discord server that I chose to leave because I got put in as a moderator. There was a little bit of miscommunication, but I was put in as a moderator, and all of a sudden there's a crisis happening in this Discord server. And I have the training to handle crises, but that was not something that I had consented to be a part of in that Discord server. I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the context, right? I didn't know this person. I didn't know where they were coming from. I didn't know that this was a common occurrence. I didn't know, like, I didn't have the information that I needed to keep that person safe or help intervene.
Yeah.
And so, like, I've got lots of training. I feel really good with crisis management, but not with a username. Not with a username from someone on the internet that I have no idea what's going on. I don't have any of the context or the information I need to help that person. Whereas sending that person to a crisis line, right, they're going to provide a little bit more information. Now, when you call a crisis line, you do not have to provide your name and you don't have to provide your address. I recommend that you do, but you don't have to. But the context wasn't there for me to be able to effectively help this person. And so what it did was it just prolonged this person's pain as I was trying to connect them with a crisis line. And it put me in a really crappy situation.
Right.
That was really hard because I wanted to help and I wanted to support, but I didn't have the context or the resources I needed to do that.
One thing I do in my streams when I can tell, and so I'm autistic, and if I don't know you like super well, then it's a little difficult for me to read anybody. So if any of y'all ever get mad at me, you'll have to tell me. I won't notice. But what I can do in streams is I run this one shot. I call it Dungeons and Doggos. Everybody gets a pre-generated dog character. I dump you in a module that's pre-written, and everybody gets to howl at stuff. And
So
I have run those both online and offline. Thank you, on offline. And sometimes people think they're totally ready to do it, but they're not. But then they get overwhelmed by but I agreed to do this. Or something else. Let's just say that's the example I'm using. What I can do there is just make space for them. Maybe that's not the right time to recommend a crisis. Maybe it's not the right time to do something like quarantine them. Maybe it's the kind of thing where it's like, cool, I'm going to keep running this game. You hang out. As soon as you're ready to jump in, you jump in. If you want to jump in via text, I've already established that before we get started, that if at any point you want to text your stuff and I read out what it is, that's fine. We can call it a mic error, or we can say that you don't want to talk out loud. I'm regularly nonverbal. I was nonverbal this morning. You wouldn't believe the hoops I had to jump in to talk to y'all today. So I try to make space for people as often as I can without I guess, engaging them. So the space isn't like, here, come talk to me about this. Tell me your feelings or thoughts or whatever. It's more like you go do you. You're perfectly equipped to you're an adult. Go handle. I don't work with kids. Go handle yourself, and you come back and join us when you can. We're here for you. Do you all have experience with that kind of thing as well?
Yeah, so to speak to that a little bit, I have a fairly severe anxiety disorder, chronic depression, and ADHD, right? All these things nice mixed together.
We're twins.
And there's like a few things, like I will sometimes, I mean, actually even this week I had a small crisis, and I had to like kind of tell my community, hey guys, I'm gonna be off for the rest of the week. I need a break. I can't do this right now, right? And they know, for example, when I tell them call this crisis line, odds are I've called it before. In fact, I would say maybe like 3 months ago, I ended up calling the Trevor Project because I was having a really, really bad time. And so when I direct people to like crisis resources, right? Like odds are I have used them myself. And it's one of those things that I think that for a lot of people, it breeds trust. It's just saying like, I know a little bit about where you might be at. And there are times when I'm very much not okay, and I'm doing my best to kind of like keep things together so I can continue to be mildly functional. And that's the best that I've got. That's all I can handle. And like, especially with the way that things are right now in the world, lately, like all I can handle is being moderately functional, right? Because like this entire shift to working from home, dealing with like all of these changes in the world has completely like messed up the routine that I kind of based my mental health and self-care on. Yeah, I need that routine.
Want the routine. Yeah.
Yeah,
got it.
we like routine. And then not having that was suddenly this like breakdown. So my community has been able to be there with me as my routines broke down, and as I found ways to make new routines, and as I find like time to stop and kind of like try to reset myself, right? And I think that what that does do is because it's such a visible process, it allows for when I have that dialogue with them being like, hey, I don't think you're okay. We're going to move you away from the rest of the community. We're going to have a discussion. I can, send you to these crisis lines. I can tell you about the experience I had when I called them, like all of that. I think it kind of like breeds a lot of trust in the community, and allows people to feel safer saying, hey, I need help. And then the other thing that we were talking about how, being able to consent to being in that position to help someone. When someone becomes a moderator in my channel, right, I have like essentially 2 moderation roles. I have the Twitch like moderator role, and then I have the Discord moderator role, and those are 2 different things. And so the Twitch people will only be responsible for what's kind of going on in the Twitch chat, and they'll be the ones to address anything that happens in the Twitch chat. And then like the Discord moderators are the same thing, but they all know very clearly what those roles are. We have established protocols for different types of crises, like amongst the mods. And then there's a couple of people who are like power mods that like will be in both communities just because they've been around for so long. And it's one of those things where like if there's something that like a newer mod doesn't know how to handle, then they usually can reach out to those mods. But like they all are very clear in what position they're in and what they can and can't do. And they've all consented to it essentially.
Yeah, I think you also brought up a really interesting point in the beginning of that, and how, we're talking about how boundaries are really necessary because, people aren't going to get effective treatment and effective care without boundaries. But it's also really important for us. Care for the caregiver is huge, especially in times like this where, for some of us, we're all day, we're treating people, and then we come home, and if we have to do that on Discord, if we have to do that on Twitch, it can be really, really, can have a negative impact on our mental health too. So setting up boundaries is just as important for yourself as it is for everyone else involved. Because if I was had to every time I stream deal with someone else's crisis, I wouldn't be streaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just wouldn't do it. So yeah, boundaries, streaming, good.
I just want to highlight another really awesome point you brought up of like how kind of visible your experience has been, right? And obviously there are going to be things that you're still not going to share with the internet, because you get to make those decisions, and you should make those decisions.
Yep.
Not everything that we put out online is the whole world. But I think having that kind of visibility and having that is incredibly powerful right now when people are feeling really isolated, people are really struggling to connect. And it can exacerbate, right? When we see things on Instagram, when we see things on Facebook, when we see things on Twitter, and we see someone's life and their life looks just perfect because we're only getting that snapshot, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to have voices out there that say, hey, I'm not okay in these ways, and this is how I'm working on dealing with it, right? So like seeing that process can be incredibly helpful for people, especially with anyone with a marginalized identity of any kind. The internet can be an incredibly powerful place for us to reach out and find community and connect with other people and learn that like, oh, we're not alone, right? This thing that I'm experiencing, I'm not the only one. That's incredibly powerful. And it is a huge service to be able to look at our computer screens and see some of our same experience reflected back at us.
Should we go back to Foozer Doc? I feel like we haven't heard.
I don't want to interrupt. This is so good.
Hi, buddy.
No. I think the biggest thing, because everybody here has already mentioned something about boundaries, and that's always been something fascinating to me when it came to the research we were doing with this, especially when it came down to when I first started to write the instrument for this study. One of the things I wrote was fans as a community, and I was quickly corrected by about the first 3 streamers that say they're not really fans, they're my community. but they're not my friends per se. And so this got into a big debate with boundaries, because I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And of course, one of the things that was mentioned was online friends can absolutely be friends.
Yes.
Even though like New York Times, Washington Post did a article every now and again about having 10,000 Facebook friends and they're not authentically your friends, which get it, understood. But the other thing that came up was this idea of what we call parasocial relationships, which are one-way relationships with a viewer and a person that is a person, I would say, on screen. And it really gets into this, and I want to ask y'all, to an extent, we mentioned this notion of online friendships who watch y'all's program. What should streamers be thinking about in terms of having your privacy respected?
Do not give your address out on stream.
Oh, please, yeah.
You don't have to put up with trolls. If somebody rolls into your chat and is going to be a butt, kick them out. You have to protect yourself. And I'm not that big yet. And I had somebody follow me recently on Twitter, and they started a conversation, and I was really, really careful, even though they're a perfectly nice human. But you have to be really, really careful, especially for people like us that might be in a marginalized community. Like, I can't run away from someone because I use a wheelchair, for example. So you want to be careful about that too. Yeah.
I think it's hard because, especially given the nature of what we do and given everyone in this chat's personalities, I feel like we tend to excuse a lot more than we probably should, or maybe in the beginning, and maybe we've learned our lessons. But for me, in the beginning, when I first started doing this, people would be in my DMs a lot, wanting to have personal conversations, ask about my life. And I think I fed into it a little bit too much. And now I kind of know a little bit better. We're allowed to stick up for ourselves. We're allowed to say this is not, we encourage boundary setting, right? But sometimes when you do it with yourself, it's just like any other thing. It's a lot harder. So, allowing yourself to be firm is important.
It's funny. I use this skill set as a manager. So I work for a company where I am a manager, and I ended up hiring people that were technically my friends. But I had to be their manager. So I suddenly had to draw this like really strict, for me, I had to do this for me line where it's like, this is my manager hat and this is my friend hat. I find I'm doing that in the stream a lot as well. If I don't have the spoons to use the manager/stream hat, then I don't go online. I don't stream. I am fortunate enough that I can afford to do that. But there have been days where I push through. I get online and I'm streaming, and you have to be really clear. Sometimes I'll say, "Hey y'all, I don't have a lot of spoons, so don't test me. Hey y'all, I don't have a lot of spoons. I need some support in this way. Like, you got to tell me how you're feeling instead of me trying to read your strange human faces and things like that." So I think that can be important too.
I think I run into this a lot in the context of when I started streaming, I had IRL friends, but there was this like whole part of me that I hid from them, which is my mental health issues. And suddenly I had this community where I felt like I could really be authentically myself. Like, I was myself around my friends, but there was a whole other facet of me that I was not able to necessarily express before. And as I started expressing it, I found people who I had things in common with, and I created real friendships, and I'm very grateful for them. But in the long run, that is not sustainable. You cannot become, everybody's friend that comes into into your, and it wasn't really sustainable in the short run either, because there were people, of course, that approached me that I was like, I'm not comfortable with this being a friendship. I'm okay, but this is where this is going to stay. And that was definitely a tough boundary. It's a weird space to be in, especially I think a lot of us, I've heard this come up before with people that I've interviewed, like, hey, I was bullied a lot as a kid. It's very weird to be now getting attention for what I'm doing, because I'm doing something very publicly facing. So to have people come to you and be like, hey, yo, you're basically, I see you every day. You talk about really intimate stuff. I feel like, because mental health is in its own nature, just intimate stuff. And I feel a kinship with you. And having to set up that, like, Yes, absolutely. But there is a screen between us. I have not met you in person. I have not had personal conversations. Whatever those boundaries are for you, everybody figures out what they are for you. But like, there's going to be a line, and there's going to be a boundary, and it's going to be different than the way I talk to my friends in real life, and it's going to be different than somebody I talk to that I've known for 2 years. It's going to be different than the conversation I'm going to have with Celeste, because we've gotten close over the years, right? And I've never met her in real life.
As opposed to you and me.
Right.
I watch your streams all the time. I think this is probably the first time you and I are interacting personally, right?
There you go.
I think you're a lovely human, but I don't consider you an in real life friend, right?
Right. But
that's okay. But that's the thing, is it should be okay. It shouldn't be expected. I don't want our communities to expect to be put off by not being friends with us. I want them to be okay with participating in the community, not needing that personal friendship with the top streamer or the top.
So I have like an interesting perspective to this, which is like, so M actually knows this, but like the reason that I kind of started streaming was because there was a streamer who helped me quite a bit, and they weren't necessarily a streamer on Twitch, but they were streaming like the artwork that they were making. But it was when I was in college and I was like trying to figure out how to come out, and I was freaking out because I was raised like aggressively religious and I was really not supposed to be gay. And it was one of those things where like on one hand I was like, oh man, it might be nice to just kind of disappear from the world. Not good. And also like I had no idea what a future for me could look like. I didn't know that I could find a wife and find love and find friends that would accept me and find happiness. Like none of that seemed realistic. So there was this artist that did this comic I like, and it was this like day-to-day comic of like her and her wife, and I loved watching them or reading them. And then she started doing streams of her just drawing the comics, and she would talk and we would chat. What
comic is this?
Chaos Life.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And so yes, so I would like watch her like drawing these comics, and she would talk about her and her wife, and she'd cover like a myriad of topics, like from like sex education to like mental health to like everything. And it would just be like me and like 5 other people like talking to her, and it felt very intimate. And I think that was the first time that I had to learn that kind of boundary existed, because to me this woman had completely changed my life. Right? This person had come in and given me an example, had given me a future that I wanted, had given me an idea of like what it might look like to really live. And because of that example, I decided to continue living, to work on getting better, to work on finding a future. And to me, that was a huge deal. But I'm not her friend, right? And so at that time, to me, she was this incredibly important person. And I think like one time I like wrote her this really long like letter, and like I had to like learn like this person doesn't know anything about me. This person has no idea like what they've done to help my life.
Right.
But like to me, they're someone who's incredibly important. And learning that boundary from the perspective of a fan, so to speak, was like really hard, but very important. But like now I can apply that in my community, especially when I'm dealing with community members who aren't necessarily that clear on that boundary. Just because I can at least treat them with compassion, right? Because I know what it's like to be in a position where you see this person, you interact with this person, you have intimate conversations with this person, and you have a love for this person, but they don't necessarily share that same relationship with you. Right. And that's got to be okay, but also like talking to that person, dealing with them like with compassion and understanding like where they're coming from can be really important. And at least for me, because of that example that this streamer set, like that's part of why I stream, right? I want to be able to be that example for someone else because it was so important to me. But at the same time, I need to make sure that like I've set those boundaries well. And sometimes I have to rely on other people to help me set those boundaries. My partner like will sometimes be like, no, you need to stop. You need to walk away. And my mods, like, when it comes to trolls in my channel, like, I like to say that I like to play with my food. Where, like, I'll, like, engage with trolls in, like, a playful manner, but, like, sometimes my mods will be like, no, that was too much, they're out. And it's like,
unhealthy.
well,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you bring up. Oh, go ahead.
No. Please
Yeah.
go ahead.
You haven't talked
Just
in a
say-
while. Your turn.
You bring up a couple of really good points, right? Like sometimes it can be really helpful for us to have other trusted humans help us figure out where our boundaries are.
Yes.
Right. Having someone have your back, having mods who are like, hey, remember how you said these are the behaviors you weren't going to tolerate? This is one of those behaviors. We're not tolerating it. It can be really helpful because I think depending on how effective your troll is, or just maybe you have a community member who really, really cares, but isn't getting those boundaries very well. And they're communicating with you in a way that is pushing those manipulative buttons for you. And maybe it's not on purpose. Maybe they're trying their best to communicate, or maybe it is on purpose. And maybe they are trying to manipulate you. I think it can feel, you often will feel like you have a responsibility to your community. You have a responsibility to share. You have a responsibility to be there. You have a responsibility to be present. You have a responsibility to be genuine. And you do have those responsibilities, but you also are allowed to set the boundaries that make you feel safe. Mm-hmm. And if you are struggling to do that, right, it can be helpful to have a person in your corner. It can also be helpful to remember that setting your boundaries is also another responsibility you have for your community. It's a responsibility you have to the people who are going to come after you, who are going to learn how to stream from you. So sometimes if you're having a hard time saying no or placing a boundary for yourself, don't place it for you. Place it for the person who's going to come after you.
Yeah, okay, so I depend on rules. When somebody puts me on their Discord server and they're like, have fun, and there are no rules channels, I leave. Almost immediately. It makes me so anxious. I have no idea what's allowed. Can I use @here? My emojis are cute. Can I use them? Like, are we allowed to swear here? Like, do people hate kittens? I don't know. You got to set those rules for everybody. At least I know that a lot of the community is going to have the same kind of anxieties or the same kind of needs. You know, that comes from a couple of different places for me. And I think it's important. I think it also makes your areas more welcoming. If you've got a rule that we're not going to put up with bigotry, fill in the blank, I feel more comfortable there. If you put in a rule that's like, this is a safe space specifically for these communities, I feel more comfortable there. If I jump into a Discord and they're like, we hate X, I leave. And that's good. You go do your thing. I'm going to go do my thing over here. Those rules are important, I think. And it's a good way to start off a relationship. And it's very sad to me that I can't walk up to a human and be like, hi, my name is Shauna. I require these things. If you don't like them, go away. And them to be like, excellent, thank you so much. These are my things. And I'm like, oh, I don't like them. And then I can walk away. You can't do that in real life. And it disappoints me every day.
Well, it is your channel, though, and boundaries and rules are something that came up quite a bit, especially rules of kind of communicating with chat. And I know we're kind of coming close on time, so I just wanted to ask, just kind of as a quick thing for everybody here, one of the other findings we had was streamers that talked to us. They're like, when I started, I was woefully unprepared for everything that we were doing. I had no idea what was going to come out of this. This was extremely important, and I think it's something that I'm like, new streamers need to be thinking about this because anxiety, as you and I mentioned on your stream, how many people started up a new stream starting in COVID?
COVID, yep.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so the big thing I want to ask everybody is, what are the things that need to be said or not be said on public forum needs to be talked about? What is it that your advice is for new streamers about things that you can say versus you can't say when it comes to this advocacy of mental health? I know we talked about it a little bit, but I just wanted to get some thoughts here.
Can I? My God, I'm so passionate about this because it kills me because people burn themselves out so hard. You cannot save the world. I understand that you're going into mental health advocacy because you feel, and I'm projecting, and this might not be the case for everybody, but I'm using the term you, but because you feel like nobody helped me, I want to be sure to be there to help other people. Absolutely. And there are two issues with that. One, you will burn yourself out. You cannot be there for everybody, no matter how hard you try. There's 7 billion people, 5 million people are streaming on Twitch. Lord knows how many more viewers there are. It's not possible. And that's why the good news is there's a ton of mental health advocates, and all of us have our own spice, and all of us will help in different ways. So it's not like you're abandoning the world because you're not the one saving it. That's number one. And number two, it has this implication that nobody else can handle anything unless you come in to save them. And that is its own, that's its own thing to like look into. Why do I feel like I'm the only one who can help other people? And I find that this is common with streamers, not just mental health advocates. And just, if you're going in because you're like, I want to help other people, awesome. That is a noble reason. Whatever you're helping them with, if you're helping them with, physical issues like Gamer Doc does, if you're helping them with mental health issues like, we do, if you're trying to just bring awareness, whatever it is, you're trying to help the world. I totally get it. But you gotta check your scope, and you gotta check the reason why you're doing it. And those two things will, that motivation and that understanding of yourself will just help you get closer and closer to a healthier balance faster, I hope.
Yeah.
That's it.
I have 3 things I think that are incredibly important to me, that like I guess might be worth sharing. One is create a crisis document. Have information on like,
or use someone else's.
What to call, or use someone
Twitch has
else's.
one.
Yeah, take this has an amazing one.
Yeah.
But basically have resources, have like suggestions on where to go, have different like hotlines depending on countries, all of that stuff. Have it somewhere so you can reference
Figure that
it.
out when you're having a crisis. That's a terrible time to figure that out.
That is a terrible, exactly. That's a terrible
help.
time.
Best command ever to set that up. Goes to a PDF, goes to a website, goes to a link off to take this. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine.
Very excited.
And then the second thing is set your boundaries early. Make sure that your viewers know what your boundaries are. I will say this, and my community makes fun of me for saying this, but I will always say, like, it is not my place. I am not a doctor. I'm not a therapist, but I'm coming at it from this perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And, like, make sure that those boundaries are clear at all times. Not only because it's a liability for you, but because they need to know as much as you need to know. And remind yourself, wait, this isn't my place. And I guess the third thing is never tell people what to do. There are a lot of times when you see someone in a situation that is oh so familiar and you just want to be like, just do this. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
No. Don't, no.
Nobody listens,
you can suggest, you can say, I think you should do, I feel, like those kinds of statements, great statements. Telling people do this doesn't work, won't help them, they're not you. Get over it. So those are my kind of 3 things.
Yeah. For me, a really easy one is don't stream under the mental health hashtag or tag unless you are going to be talking about mental health and you're prepared, because there are people who will look for that hashtag and look for streamers who are streaming under that tag and go to your stream to talk about these issues. So unless you're actually prepared to talk about that, don't stream under that tag.
Yeah. I think it's probably been sort of it's come at a little more obliquely, but I don't think it's legal to dispense medical advice on a Twitch channel.
It's
so
really scary because there are people doing it, but ethically you're not supposed. And Dr. Kilmer could probably speak to this more, right?
Yeah, don't. Yeah,
so if I'm talking on a channel, like we're not in a therapeutic relationship,
right? Yeah,
I can give general advice, but I'm not giving advice directly to you. We don't have that kind of relationship.
Either mental health or physical health. I mean, people will come to me all the time and be like, okay, exactly what should I do for my condition? And I'm like, hell, they can't even tell me exactly what my condition is. I don't know. Like, my chair's cool though. It has neat wheels. So be careful about that, and be careful about what you do share. You would not believe the stuff that people have dug up from my past because it's stuck in a video somewhere. There are things that people know about me that I don't remember. So please be careful about that. And if you're going to be inclusive, be inclusive. You might not be seeing web captions for this video, and I can't tell you how sorry I am about that. My community is going to be very disappointed if they're not up. And I highly recommend things like web captions or audio descriptions if you're putting up a video, or any of the resources y'all have mentioned about those mental health things. Those are, if you're going to be inclusive, go all the way.
So I just want to echo what everyone said. Do all of those things. And the two things I'm going to add on top of that is better late than never, right? Like, it is okay to realize, like, oh, I'm not okay with that. I didn't realize that before, or I didn't feel comfortable saying that I wasn't okay with that before. You can say that now. If your community pushes back, you're still allowed to say that. If trolls on the internet push back, they should go away. Yes. And the other piece is, if you start to feel uncomfortable, even if you don't start to feel uncomfortable, it can be really helpful to have people that check in. So those people that you do consider friends, those people that you are willing to be really honest with, it is okay. And you absolutely should say, hey, this made me kind of uncomfortable. Did that make you uncomfortable too? Hey, will you read this chain? Will you give me some feedback? Especially if you're finding that you're having a hard time setting boundary, having someone else step in and look at that, or even thinking, oh man, if this was Shona, would I let someone treat her that way? Right? That can be really, really helpful, because you deserve to be taken care of too.
Yeah.
Aww.
That's sweet.
We get that on a good note, everybody. No, I can't thank y'all enough for being a part of this. As part of kind of my privacy recency effect, could everybody just real quick mention where everybody can reach you, and if there's any more advice to be had out there, because I know an hour, we could probably go 3 hours to talk about this, but I want to make sure that everybody can be contacted. So
yeah. So feel free to find me at like7spoon. 7 is spelled out. You can find me on Twitch or Twitter that way. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I stream a lot of D&D, and occasionally I knit and play Overwatch, and I'm a little more available to have conversations around the knitting and Overwatch, but I'm always I'm gonna do my very best to reply. I was gonna say always reply, but this might get big, so I'm gonna do my very best to reply to everybody, and I will certainly point you in the direction of some kind of resource.
Awesome sauce.
You can find me at Doctors Kilmer. I don't stream unless I'm like on other people's streams.
She's on one of my streams.
I'm on. Yes, that is true. I am. And then I work with Game to Grow, so you can find us online.
Oh, I do too. Yes, you can. Yes, what she said. Game to Grow.
You can find me on Twitter, gamerdoc_. And then I stream Mondays and Wednesdays on Twitch.
Celeste.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I am Celesmeh, CELESMEH, on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, and twitch.tv. You can find me streaming games Mondays and Wednesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and on Saturdays at around 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do Self-Care Saturdays.
And my name is Anxiety, MX. I am dyslexic. It's anxiety without the AN, with an M instead. So you can find me I'm on Twitter all the time. Anxiety.com is a great resource. It's funny. You can laugh. It's okay. Everybody can laugh.
No, it was funny the way you said it. It's not
I
funny.
laugh because that's my life.
Yeah, no, as you were trying to spell it, I was like, so
anxiety with an M instead of an AN. But yeah, so find me on Twitter. Anxiety.com has resources, and as well as all of my writing, which I call research biography. So you can check all that out. I also stream 3 times a week. The current schedule is Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern. Come on in. We're either talking to a mental health professional, talking to people who live with mental health conditions, doing positive news. That's something we just started, or just having an open discussion on mental health. So you're welcome.
Thank you.
And I am Fusrodoc, FUSRODOC. I run a small lore stream called Lore du Jour. We're doing Skyrim now, and we will be doing that for quite a while. Good. It's every Tuesdays at 8:30. So 8:30 Eastern. Please stop by and Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for doing this. I hope that this has been a tremendous help. And for anybody watching, anybody that's new to streaming, I hope these resources are very helpful for you. And again, please reach out. Thank y'all.
Bye, Stream.
Bye.